Most men step into the ring with a plan.
Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
His opponents stepped in with a prayer. In the 80s, the world didn't tune in to watch boxing. They watched a natural disaster unfold on live TV.
Mike Tyson, the baddest man on the planet.
Nobody could get close to me. I'm the best fighter in the world.
When Mike Tyson slipped through the ropes, the air in the arena grew heavy. There were no flashy robes, no dancing, no smiles for the cameras, just black trunks, black shoes, no socks, and a stare that promised pain. People didn't pay to see 12 rounds of technical fencing. They paid to witness an execution. They paid for that electrifying moment when the lights go out in another man's eyes. Tyson wasn't just a champion. He was a cultural phenomenon who defined an era of raw power. He was the baddest man on the planet.
There we go! I don't think you get up from this!
I'm the best ever.
You scared coward.
Take your life.
Praise be to Allah.
But what if we were looking at it wrong the whole time? What if that indestructible killing machine wasn't fueled by hate, but by fear? What if the brutality we admired so much wasn't a display of strength, but a desperate cry for help that was drowned out by the roar of the crowd?
Mike is a complicated individual.
He looked like he could kill somebody.
Mike Tyson was called the baddest man on the planet because he was the baddest man on the planet.
To understand the monster, we must first find the child who was sacrificed so the monster could be born. Brownsville, Brooklyn, the 70s. This was no place for a childhood. It was a war zone. A concrete jungle where the air smelled of burnt rubber, cheap liquor, and omnipresent hopelessness. In this ecosystem, little Mike was at the bottom of the food chain, fat, lisping, with glasses too big for his face. He was the perfect victim. Every day was a battle just to get home without bruises, without having his lunch money stolen, or without being stripped of his last shreds of dignity. Fear was his first language. He learned to speak it fluently. He learned to be invisible. His only sanctuary was the rooftops and his pigeons. Those birds represented a freedom he didn't have. They were the only creatures that didn't judge him, that didn't want anything from him. And right there on the roof, surrounded by feathers and cooing, something happened that changed the course of boxing history. We all know the story, but few understand its psychological weight. A local bully took one of his pigeons and ripped its head off right in front of him. In that moment, when the blood of an innocent animal stained Tyson's hands, something in that small, terrified boy died. And something else, something far darker, woke up. The first fight. The first time his fist connected with someone else's flesh and bone. That feeling wasn't just about revenge, it was about power. Suddenly, he wasn't the victim anymore. He was judge, jury, and executioner. He learned that respect in Brownsville isn't given. Respect is taken through violence. The boy who was afraid to walk the streets became a terror who robbed people not for money, but for that intoxicating sense of control. The path to juvenile detention was inevitable, but in reality, it was the path to his destiny. Destiny sometimes takes the form of an old man with a bald head and paranoia in his eyes. Cus D'Amato. He wasn't just a trainer, he was an architect of souls. When 13-year-old Mike arrived at his gym in Catskill, Cus didn't see a delinquent. He saw a future heavyweight king. He saw a rough diamond that just needed to be cut under extreme pressure. The relationship between Cus and Mike wasn't standard. It was a symbiosis of father and son, a general and his perfect weapon. Cus D'Amato took Tyson's greatest handicap, his paralyzing fear, and turned it into fuel. He explained that fear is like fire. If you control it, it keeps you warm. If you let it rage out of control, it burns you to ash. In that old mansion in Catskill, far from the noise of New York, the programming began. Every night by the flickering light of the TV, they watched old black and white footage of fighters from the past. Cus brainwashed him, in both the best and worst sense of the word. He repeated that he was invincible, that he was a god, that no one could even touch him. Mike trained with a fanaticism that bordered on obsession. Up at 4 a.m., running through the snow in heavy boots while his peers slept. It wasn't just physical training, it was the construction of armor. The peekaboo style, hands high, constant head movement, explosive lunges, was designed exactly for him. For a short, stocky brawler who had to get inside. When Mike stepped into the ring early in his career, he wasn't boxing, he was hunting. His opponents lost long before the opening bell. They lost in the locker room when they heard the sound of Tyson hitting the mitts. They lost looking into his eyes during the referee's instructions. There was no emotion there. Just the dead stare of a shark that smells blood. 1986, the Hilton Hotel in Las Vegas. Trevor Berbick. The date the boy from Brownsville became the youngest heavyweight champion in history. He was 20 years old. But what we saw in the ring wasn't a 20-year-old kid. It was a perfect storm of kinetic energy. Tyson's era in the late 80s wasn't sport. It was a public execution on live broadcast. People didn't pay to see boxing. They paid to see destruction. The fight with Michael Spinks, which lasted 91 seconds, is still considered the peak of his dominance.
And he's down again and in serious trouble.
He's not going to make it. It's all over.
Spinks, an undefeated champion, looked like a terrified tourist who had wandered into a lion's cage. Tyson's style was hypnotic. That combination of brutal power and unexpected speed was an anomaly for a heavyweight. He slipped punches by millimeters and returned fire with force that broke ribs and orbital bones. But it wasn't just physics, it was psychological warfare. Tyson broke his opponent's wills. He stripped them of their manhood, their confidence, their belief in themselves.
I'm the best ever. I'm the most brutal and vicious and most ruthless champion there's ever been. There's no one can stop me. Lynx is a conqueror. No, I'm Alexander. He's no Alexander. I'm the best ever. My style is impetuous. My defense is impregnable. And I'm just ferocious. I want your heart. I want to eat his children. Praise be to Allah.
He screamed into the cameras, and the world believed him, because it was true. He was like Alexander the Great in satin shorts. He conquered the world so fast that no one even had time to blink. But the air is thin at the top, and when you're at the summit alone without a compass, you start to suffocate on your own ego. Every Greek tragedy has its turning point. For Tyson, it wasn't a loss in the ring. It was the death of Cus D'Amato. The moment the old man died, Tyson lost the only moral anchor he ever had. The protective shield vanished, and the vultures began to circle. Don King, a name synonymous with the decay of boxing. King wormed his way into Tyson's favor, and with him came chaos. The discipline Cus had built for years began to crumble. Training was replaced by parties. Sparring partners were replaced by yes men who just nodded along. And then came Tokyo, 1990, Buster Douglas. That fight was supposed to be a formality, another sacrifice on the altar of Iron Mike. But that morning in Tokyo, the unthinkable happened. A god bled. Tyson, unprepared, distracted, and arrogant, ran into a man who simply refused to be afraid that day. When Tyson hit the canvas fumbling for his mouthpiece.
Face down goes Tyson.
What I took from it is that it was the beginning of the end of Mike Tyson, the Mike Tyson that we knew.
The world went silent. The myth of invincibility evaporated. What followed was a free fall, a rape conviction, a trial that divided America. 3 years in prison, where an inmate number became his new identity. When he came out, he was different. The body was still strong, but the soul was poisoned. The anger that once fueled his victories was now consuming him from the inside. The fights with Evander Holyfield weren't about boxing. They were about desperation. That moment when he bit off a piece of Holyfield's ear wasn't a strategic act. It was the scream of a drowning man. It was proof that the animal inside him had finally taken control of the human. The whole world looked at him with horror and disgust. The king had become an outcast. The hero became the villain in a circus he helped build. It's easy to judge Mike Tyson by his actions. It's harder to understand him through his loneliness. Because despite the millions of dollars, despite the massive mansions and tigers in the backyard, Mike Tyson was one of the loneliest people on earth. His relationships were a series of disasters. He was looking for the love his mother denied him, and that death stole from him with Cus. But instead, He found only people who loved his fame, his money, his aura, but not him. Robin Givens, Don King, that whole parade of friends who vanished the moment the money tap ran dry. When the arena lights went out and the crowd fell silent, Mike was left alone with his thoughts. And that was the scariest place on earth. He was a sensitive introvert trapped in the role of a global gladiator. A man who could recite boxing history with encyclopedic precision. A man who cried at old movies, yet the world demanded only blood from him. This duality destroyed him. On one side, Iron Mike, the indestructible machine. On the other, Mike, the little boy from Brownsville, still terrified that someone is going to hurt him. His aggression was just armor meant to protect that vulnerable core. The more afraid he was, the more aggressive he became. It was a vicious cycle of pain. Cut to the present. Look at the man today. A gray beard, a calmer voice, a laugh that doesn't sound so manic anymore. Mike Tyson survived. He survived drug addictions that would have killed a horse. He survived bankruptcy. He survived the death of his own daughter, a tragedy that would break any parent. Today, he no longer fights for belts. He fights for peace of mind. We see him on podcasts, analyzing his life with surprising wisdom and introspection. He is no longer the rabid dog on a chain. He is the tribal elder who returned from war and tells stories to warn the youth. He built a cannabis empire, returned to the ring for exhibitions that are more a celebration of his survival than actual combat. People see him differently today. It's no longer fear. It's respect. Respect for someone who fell to rock bottom, into the deepest mud, and managed to claw his way back. Of course, the shadow is still there. When you look into his eyes, you still see flashes of that old darkness. That killer never completely disappeared. He's just sleeping. But Mike has learned to be his tamer. He is no longer a slave to his impulses. What will remain of him when the final bell rings? It won't just be statistics. 50 wins, 44 knockouts, those are just numbers. Mike Tyson's legacy is far more complex. It is a story about what absolute power and absolute fame can do to an unprepared human mind. It is a cautionary tale for anyone who thinks success will solve their inner traumas. Tyson showed us that you can have the world at your feet and still feel like the least important person in the room. But his legacy is also about resilience, about the ability to get back up. He is proof that the past is not a death sentence, that even the baddest man on the planet can find redemption, can find love, can find himself. He changed the way we view athletes. He brought hip-hop culture, street grit, and an authenticity that was previously taboo into boxing. Without Tyson, the current era of combat sports as we know it wouldn't exist. He was the bridge between the old school of gentlemen and the new era of media chaos. Mike Tyson isn't a hero in the classic sense, and he is certainly not just a victim. He is a mirror held up to the society that created him, celebrated him, then destroyed him, and finally forgave him. His life is proof that the greatest fight doesn't happen between the ropes under the spotlights. The greatest fight happens in the silence, in the head, between who we were and who we are trying to become. From the ashes of that furious boy from Brooklyn rose a man who finally found what he had been searching for his entire career. Not a championship title, but peace. Because in the end, even the hardest punch eventually loses its power. But the story of the fall and rise of Mike Tyson will resonate forever. Think about that the next time you face your own demons. Because if Iron Mike could tame them, so can you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out the next video.